connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles. You're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. Updates from the recently concluded 20th International Institute for Strategic Studies Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. The Department of National Defense, OIC, Senior Undersecretary Carlito Galvez Jr. shed light on the importance of upholding the rule of law and engaging in peaceful dialogues and multilateralism to address various disputes in the Asia-Pacific region. It's been over 2 weeks since the devastating cyclone Mocha struck Myanmar, leaving behind a trail of destruction and despair. In a concerning report released on Friday, the UN highlighted the uncertain access to aid, the rapid spread of diseases, and the looming threat of a severe food crisis in the affected areas. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese expressed his intentions to strengthen economic relations with Vietnam as he embarked on the visit to the country. It's been over 2 weeks since the devastating cyclone Mocha struck Myanmar, leaving behind a trail of destruction and despair. In a concerning report released on Friday, the UN highlighted the uncertain access to aid, the rapid spread of diseases, and the looming threat of a severe food crisis in the affected areas. However, despite the dire situation, the assistance pouring into the affected regions remains insufficient to meet the growing demands. To shed light on the situation, here's Titan Mitra, the resident representative of the UN Development Program, or UNDP, in Myanmar. Take a look.
Time is absolutely of the essence. We're seeing that food reserves have been completely wiped out. The monsoon is just a matter of weeks away. Water sources need to be urgently decontaminated or alternative sources identified. And the international community has to be given widespread access to the affected communities, and that's a very urgent requirement. This really is a time for the depoliticization and the demilitarization of aid, because the needs are absolutely immense. The recovery will take years. There's 1.6 million people that will need support across Rakhine, Chin, Sagaing, Magwe, and Kachin. And the majority of these were already the poorest of the poor.
The aftermath of Cyclone Mocha has resulted in an urgent surge in needs as the powerful winds reaching speeds of 250 kilometers per hour ravage homes, farmland, and livestock. Mitra revealed that an aid distribution plan has already been submitted to the military authorities. However, swift approval is of utmost importance as it would allow aid partners to freely move and distribute the much-needed assistance across the affected regions. In addition, he expressed his deep concerns regarding the potential consequences if people are unable to begin planting food crops within the next few weeks. He cautioned that such a delay could lead to the emergence of a major food crisis in the coming months. And we have some updates from the recently concluded 20th International Institute for Strategic Studies Shangri-La Dialogue that was held in Singapore. Department of National Defense, OIC, Senior Undersecretary Carlito Galvez Jr. shed light on the importance of upholding the rule of law and engaging in peaceful dialogues and multilateralism to address various disputes in the Asia-Pacific region, particularly the territorial dispute between the Philippines and China in the West Philippine Sea. Take a look.
As the old adage goes, good fences make good neighbors, as it is only when neighbors have clear boundaries and respect for such boundaries would relations remain genuinely amicable. The issues in the South China Sea and the East China Sea and the strains in the Cross Strait have particularly emerged as flashpoints in the region. The increasing provocations in the Korean Peninsula, as well as the skirmishes in the Sino-Indian and Indian-Pakistan borders, have also been fueling mutual suspicion between parties involved. 5,000 miles away, The war in Ukraine has showed us that geopolitical calamities, which we thought have turned highly unlikely since the end of the Cold War, are certainly still entirely plausible. In upholding the rule of law, as a small nation relative to big and powerful neighbor with a grand design on its territory, the Philippines has always believed that international law is the greatest equalizer among states. It is exactly this belief that made us confidently resort to the compulsory dispute settlement mechanism of the United Nations Convention of the Laws of the Seas, or UNCLOS, and the Hague Tribunal. We view the 2016 arbitration award as not only setting the reason and right in the South China Sea, but also as an inspiration for how matters should be considered by states facing similar challenging circumstances.
Now, Galvez emphasized the significance of the G7 support, viewing it as an affirmation of the preeminence of the law and a triumph of amity over ambition.
We welcome the G7's recent statement, which reaffirms the legally binding nature of the award, and all other statements made by the governments around the world will uphold the ruling as a milestone in corpus of international law. In the same vein that the Philippines underscores the resolution of the complex competing claims in the South China Sea in accordance with international law. Ladies and gentlemen, acting in isolation and decoupling amid the declining state of goodwill in the region would only serve the return of an iron curtain that will undermine any potential for confidence building and cooperation between and among us. It is in this context that ASEAN remains as a cornerstone of the Philippine foreign policy. ASEAN's principle of openness, transparency, and inclusivity represents its continued equitable treatment of norms and principles, offering a neutral ground where all table their interests in the region.
He also acknowledged that while wars are not inevitable, they often arise due to the grave failure of countries to effectively resolve their fundamental differences.
Wars are not inevitable, but a result of our grave failure to resolve our fundamental differences. When the risk of conflict looms, it is time for more dialogue, not less. It is along this line that ASEAN must be strengthened as an institution for building strategic trust and cooperations which are at the core of preemption. I would like to end my remarks with a quote of Albert Einstein, that peace cannot be kept by force, it can only be achieved by understanding.
Staying in Singapore, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin emphasized the significance of dialogue between the U.S. and China in order to prevent potential miscalculations that could escalate into conflict. Austin's comments come after Beijing declined a formal meeting between him and his Chinese counterpart. In the latest incident over the South China Sea, a U.S. Air Force aircraft had a tense encounter with a Chinese fighter jet. The U.S. Indo-Pacific Command revealed that the Chinese J-16 fighter jet engaged in what was described as an unnecessarily aggressive maneuver while intercepting a U.S. Air Force RC-135 aircraft last week.
A cordial handshake over dinner is no substitute for a substantive engagement. And the more that we talk, the more we can avoid the misunderstandings and miscalculations that could lead to crisis or conflict. You know, I am deeply concerned that the PRC has been unwilling to engage more seriously on better mechanisms for crisis management between our two militaries. But I hope that will change, and soon.
Now, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin emphasized America's commitment to upholding the freedom of all nations to carry out lawful activities in the Indo-Pacific region.
We won't be deterred by dangerous operational behavior at sea or in international airspace. The People's Republic of China continues to conduct an alarming number of risky intercepts of U.S. and allied aircraft flying lawfully in international airspace. We've all just seen another troubling case of aggressive and unprofessional flying by the PRC. So we will support our allies and partners as they defend themselves against coercion and bullying. To be clear, we do not seek conflict or confrontation, but we will not flinch in the face of bullying or coercion. Well, thanks for the question. Let me say up front that I respectfully disagree with the premise of the question in that we are trying to goad China into a conflict. It's in fact just the opposite. We are doing everything in our power to make sure that we maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific because, as I said earlier in my remarks, this is important to all of us in this region.
The CSIS Southeast Asia program hosted Professor and Dr. Marie Pangestu or Pangestu at the ASEAN Leadership Forum. Drawing from her extensive expertise gained from years of involvement in government, academia, and international organizations, Dr. Pangestu offered her unique perspective on the economic challenges faced by the region. Of particular importance are the pressing issues surrounding the climate crisis, as well as the critical need to address food and energy security. Dr. Pangestu's insights are expected to shed light on these economic headwinds, offering valuable guidance and potential solutions for the Southeast Asian region. Take a look.
I think we managed to get out of the COVID quite okay. So if you look at at least on the growth trends, most of the Southeast Asian countries have been able to recover post-COVID. Most of the countries except Vietnam experienced contraction in 2020, but rebounded in 2021 and 2022. Global value chains actually allowed East Asia and Southeast Asia to recover more quickly than others. So we're looking good in terms of compared to other developing countries, but growth is moderating in 2023. And there are three linked international developments which will impact on this projected slowdown. The slowdown in global economy, commodity prices falling, and financial tightening with interest rates remaining high. And there will be some reprieve, I suppose, with China growing faster in 2023 than in 2022. And this is actually not just in Southeast Asia, but for all developing countries. So we are facing, again, in a more serious way, what's called the middle income trap. Longer-term challenges. So this is because we are talking about what needs to be done nationally and regionally moving forward. Longer-term challenges, decoupling, and I'll mention a little bit more about decoupling, the fears of defragmentation and decoupling. Aging. So this is we always think when we talk about aging, we used to just talk about China and Japan, but actually ASEAN, especially Thailand, is already facing the issue of aging and adaptation to climate. These are the three longer-term challenges. And I would add human capital losses that happened during COVID. Which, if you don't address them now, you will, not be able to address your productivity issue. Because ASEAN theme this year is ASEAN Matters, epicentrum of growth, right? So how do we continue to grow given all those challenges? Uncertainties of decoupling and defragmentation. If you look at what the figures are showing is that despite the trade wars, China's importance in world trade has in fact increased, and China is more central to global trade than ever. And global value chains have become actually increasingly more important as part of global trade. It's about 52% now important. Firms continue to seek customers, markets, suppliers, and partners from all around the world, because the answer to addressing all those concerns, whether it's resilience, security, or geopolitics, is diversification. and deconcentration, and developing more global and regional value chains. So this is what ASEAN needs to respond to. And despite the trade restrictions, you have trade liberalization happening, including deepening of trade agreements, including RCEP. And the US-China trade war implication is probably the only one that because it's happened for 5 years. US trade to China and China trade to US went down. But third country trade to China and the US, especially to the US, has gone up. So what's happened is relocation. And who have benefited from the relocation? Southeast Asia, especially Vietnam. The numbers are showing it's Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and Singapore. And the saying now is high wall and small garden. So how can ASEAN take the opportunity of this high wall and small garden? How can we be the friend in the friendshoring? Just to give you an example on the critical rare materials and the EV subsidy under IRA, where friends are being defined as countries that have an FTA with the US. And of course, Europe and Japan have overcome this by, okay, we have a limited minerals trade agreement with the US, and that gets them to have a subsidy, they can enjoy the subsidy from the EV. So right now it's being discussed. IPEF may be an opportunity to define that friend agreement that can get the ASEAN countries, which have the rare materials and nickel and cobalt, Philippines, Indonesia and Malaysia, to be specific, they can also benefit from this. So
now we have some significant developments in the realm of international finance and the pursuit of sustainable development. Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development, Naveed Hanif, presented the Secretary General's policy brief on the international financial architecture, highlighting the need for substantial reforms to achieve the sustainable development goals and combat climate change.
The current international financial system is not delivering the long-term, stable and affordable financing required to achieve the sustainable development goals and combat climate change. And this is due to many reasons, but first and foremost, the economic landscape has changed, the nature of markets have changed, they are deeply integrated, the risks have changed, and the rising inequality and climate emergence. This is for the first time in the UN's history that a UN Secretary General is presenting such a comprehensive set of proposals to reform the international financial architecture, because he has repeatedly conveyed the financial system is morally bankrupt.
Now, the Secretary General's proposal encompasses 6 key areas of action, including the reform of global economic governance, sovereign debt markets, provision of long-term and affordable loans to developing countries, establishment of a global financial safety net, tackling short-termism and volatility in financial markets, and redesigning the international tax system.
G20 has already started capital adequacy framework analysis, how the multilateral development banks should change their operations. It started in Bali under the Indonesian presidency. World Bank is already developing an evolution roadmap, how it has to evolve to finance the SDGs and to fight climate change. It's ongoing. Similarly, IMF held a roundtable on debt. How do we deal with the debt distress of these 62 countries at risk or already in debt distress? What do we see coming our way? First, we see immediate shifts in operations of these multilateral development banks. The new president of the World Bank is assuming office today, and we see a change coming in that leadership also. So we are fairly optimistic that these proposals will land at different platforms and make changes which are long awaited and now desperately needed to reverse climate change and rescue the sustainable development goals.
In tonight's other news, Riyadh has just made a significant announcement regarding oil output cuts, following a meeting of major oil producers aimed at stabilizing prices amidst concerns of a recession. Saudi Arabia has taken the lead. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, consisting of 13 member countries headed by Saudi Arabia, along with its 10 partners led by Russia, engaged in some intense negotiations during the gathering. In an effort to address the current challenges faced by oil producers, Saudi Arabia's Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman announced a fresh cut of 1 million barrels per day for the month of July. Take a look.
The countries that had agreed to do the voluntary cuts have extended that voluntary cuts to end of 24. And I would have to call it the Saudi lollipop, which is 1 million barrel of reduction for the start that starts at the 1st of July. And that million is also extendable.
Now, these output cuts come in the midst of falling oil prices and high market volatility, largely influenced by the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has caused significant disruption to global economies. Since the announcement of April's cuts, oil prices have experienced a significant decline, with Brent crude falling to nearly $70 per barrel. This price level has not been seen since December 2021. Traders and market analysts are growing increasingly concerned about the potential decline in demand. The global economy faces challenges as the U.S. confronts issues related to inflation and higher interest rates, while China's post-COVID rebound appears to be slowing down. With these uncertainties, today's meeting held particular significance as Russia aimed to maintain its production levels, while Saudi Arabia sought to raise prices to balance its budget. Analysts such as UBS's Giovanni Stanovo noted the importance of unity among the oil producers, stating they have showed again they work together. At the end of the day, it's about what they agree. The demonstration of unity was a crucial aspect of today's meeting. Russia, heavily reliant on oil revenues, is currently facing economic challenges due to its ongoing involvement in the war in Ukraine and Western sanctions. In an attempt to mitigate these challenges, Russia has been exporting oil to countries like India and China, as these Asian giants continue to take advantage of the availability of affordable crude oil. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese expressed his intentions to strengthen economic relations with Vietnam as he embarked on a visit to the country. The aim of his trip is to foster closer ties between Australia and this Southeast Asian nation. According to ABC News, Prime Minister Albanese arrived in Hanoi on Saturday and was warmly received by both locals and the media, and also had the opportunity to sample local delicacies and banh mi restaurant, where he engaged with the vibrant culture and flavors of Vietnam. Prime Minister Albanese, speaking at a business reception on Saturday night, expressed great optimism and confidence in Vietnam's economic prowess. He recognized Vietnam as an economic powerhouse and expressed his desire to further enhance bilateral cooperation. In addition to his commitment to strengthening economic ties, Prime Minister Albanese made important announcements during his visit. Recognizing the significance of Vietnam's energy transformation, Mr. Albanese unveiled a financial package aimed at supporting this endeavor.
I'm pleased to announce that Australia will be stepping up our support for Vietnam's energy transformation with an important package of new overseas development assistance of $105 million for supporting sustainable infrastructure planning, for stimulating private investment in clean energy infrastructure, and delivering technical assistance to develop Vietnam's critical mineral sector. Finally, the Prime Minister and I discussed our shared vision of an open, stable, secure, prosperous and resilient Indo-Pacific that is respectful of national sovereignty. Australia sees and acknowledges the centrality of ASEAN. And next year in March, we will host in Australia a summit for ASEAN leaders, and I of course invited the Prime Minister to fully participate in that.
Thứ 8, hai bên tái khẳng định tầm quan trọng của việc bảo đảm hòa bình, ổn định, an ninh, an toàn và tự do hàng hải, hàng không tại Biển Đông, giải quyết tranh chấp bằng các biện pháp hòa bình trên cơ sở tôn trọng luật pháp quốc tế, đặc biệt là UNCLOS 1982 và đảm bảo an ninh, an toàn, tự do hàng không hàng hải trên Biển Đông. Hai bên nhất trí tiếp tục duy trì, trao đổi, chia sẻ thông tin và tăng cường hợp tác biển.
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angela. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.